grade grubbing. Yeah, fine. Students can ask for it. You shouldn't give it. Ever. Because that doesn't help students become better. All right, all right. As you might guess, there's something interesting to talk about today, and oh boy. Of course, as always, I always talk about what's going on in the universities. Why? Because the universities is the place where we train the next generation of scientists, and so it is kind of important to understand what's going on. And I do want to talk a little bit about this because it pairs nicely with an older article, and the survey itself is somewhat interesting in question as covered by the College Fix. Um, Grade grubbing explodes as students beg for better grades and educators give in. But before we begin, if you're not a member of Wokescreen, well, you should be. Wokescreen is where we are working on creating a home for the disillusioned cultural refugees and starting to make things better, turn things around in the culture, and actually, push things back towards, classical liberal enlightenment values, thinking about rationality and reason and what have you, and creating some artistic things as well. I'm a member of Wokescreen. If you're not, you can become a member with 10% off using my promo code ScioSophia here at the bottom of the screen. And there's actually a lot of great stuff going on at Wokescreen, be it the editorial with some nuanced takes, the Crowdsource podcast with Kieran White, who is the founder of Wokescreen and friend of this channel. Dead Drop Dialect is new stuff with some more in-depth looks at things. And Culture Jam is going to be pretty dang awesome because it's actually going to be all about culture related things going on here. So I'm actually talking with Kieran about a Culture Jam-esque segment for the Wokescreen, also on top of the Crowdsource podcast. But if you're not a member, become a member with 10% off. It's ScioSophia, with ScioSophia as the code here. It's also linked in the description of the video. You get access to all of that and so much more, actually, because of the community Discord and discussions there. Chit chats going on all the time. Games night, which is a blast. You do not know what you're missing if you're not a member of Wokescreen. So back to the video. Grade grubbing. Oh my gosh, what is that? Well, basically students asking for grades that are perhaps better than what they have earned. And I will give you my take. And I want to be careful with this on the one hand, because this is not to say that there aren't instances where it might be justified in that. Not the grade grubbing per se, but the correction of professors, because this is not about a professor who is a horrible teacher and can't get across the material well. This is not about a situation, perhaps, where a student, for whatever reason, traumatic event, injury, and I don't mean traumatic event like just hearing a nasty word on campus or something like that. Say you have some emergency that happens in your family, something that goes along that line, or you yourself are in a hospital very sick for whatever reason. There's not reasons. There are good reasons why one might consider at a university level either allowing students to redo classes or adjusting grades related to that, but mostly not adjusting grades. I don't think adjusting grades is not what should be done, but giving students an opportunity to try again when something ill in life has happened that obviously might have compromised their ability on a test at a given time, or if an instructor was such a lousy teacher that, let's say, an exam question was phrased so poorly that many or almost all of the students got it wrong. In which case, that is the fault of the teacher. That is not the fault of the student. However, students, I say this to the students that are listening, if it is your education, it is your education. It is the grade that you are getting. You are the one who is primarily responsible for that, not the teacher, not the university, not your parents either. You are the ones who are entirely responsible for that. And if you are looking to go into a scientific field, I will tell you right now, you are the one who is entirely responsible for the research that you do. So get used to it with your own education. So grade grubbing is not a good idea. And as for the instructors, I lose a lot of respect for instructors who are just giving in to that and inflating grades. More students from the college fix. More students are asking for better grades than earned, and a vast majority of educators questioned in a recent survey admit they've given in rather to those demands in a trend now dubbed grade grubbing. Intelligent.com surveyed nearly 300 educators in late August, including high school teachers and professors who work with both undergraduates and graduate students. The results: 44% of educators reported that they've had students demand a higher grade than they've earned very often or somewhat often. Another 24% said they get asked every so often. So, which is to say, there's what is that? That's 68. So there's 32% who are not asked. Who've not been asked. Additionally, 82% of teachers reported that they gave in to these requests and inflated students' grades, with 34% saying they rarely do, 20% saying they do it occasionally, and 17% say they do sometimes, and 11% saying they almost always. So this is an important note to say, because I have always had a problem with how not just the College Fix, but a lot of these news outlets frame these kinds of things, because 82% of teachers saying they gave in to the requests. Okay. 34% rarely, 20% occasionally, things like that. There's sliding scales here. They're lumping everybody in under one bucket to say, oh, look at this, 80% of teachers are giving into this. And oftentimes it's phrased in such a way that it's always 80%. 80% are always doing it or almost always doing it, when it's not really that. It's actually about 10%. And 18% reported that they never agree. Okay. So that said, like I said at the beginning, I don't approve of the idea of inflating grades. That's a bad thing. You're selling the students short. And you're not inspiring them to actually seek to be better necessarily. You are just giving them what they want, which is not good. That is spoiling. That is not helping. In the same breath, like I said, if there's some kind of traumatic event of illness or family emergency or something like that for the family or for the student themselves or what have you, then I can understand giving a little bit of deference in there in the grading part of it. I can really understand that. That does make sense to me, in terms of at least letting students try again on an exam or take a class over again or something like that. Inflating? No. I don't think inflating grades is a good thing. Doesn't help students become better in their fields and the things they want to go into. And let me put it to you this way: you don't get your grade inflated when you're working as an engineer. You don't get your grade inflated when you're working as a scientist. You either succeed or you fail most of the time, or there's maybe a little bit in between with the scientific part of it, where you're, figuring out certain things and you run into an error that maybe, well, not an error, you run into a problem that allowed you to go off in a different direction and find more things out. There are things like that that's a little bit more nuanced, but not knowing your stuff, you're not given, let's say, a higher grade than what you've earned if you don't know what you're doing while you're doing a grant. 45% of respondents surveyed reported Generation Z students, which for those of you who don't know, Generation Z is the generation after millennials, ask for better grades more frequently compared to previous generations. Write-in responses from educators as to why Gen Z grade grubs more than their parents and grandparents included depression, and that quote, they're brainwashed by the current woke agenda that makes them think they're owed a free ride. Now, I actually forwarded a lot of this to Deb Philman, the host of The Reason We Learn, and she will be joining us on the next Side Chat Saturday, by the way. In part because I think it connects well with something that she's been talking about quite frequently, which I wouldn't have thought of it, but I do very much agree it's a possibility that, just catering to students' feelings and making sure students feel good all the time doesn't help them necessarily learn anything, and you're not owed a high grade by anyone. And yet that's what's being passed through, because oftentimes the benefit to the school is having more graduates. Whether or not they're actually learning anything is something else. Diane Dayeski, a professor of strategic communication at Ithaca College, told the College Fix, she is not entirely surprised by the results. We've all heard that their experiences in early grades, especially in sports or extracurricular work, have led them to believe that everyone is a winner and deserves some kind of reward for merely participating. You do not. According to scholar Carrie O'Grady, a higher education consultant, students grade grub for many reasons. Whether it's because they need to stay on a sports team, are on academic probation, have a false sense of their own abilities, or simply want to maintain an overall A average, many students will find a reason to email you for a better score than they rightfully earned, O'Grady wrote in an April op-ed for Inside Higher Ed. 38% of educators reported that they have faced harassment from students and 33% from parents over grades. Susan Hansen, an associate professor of history at the University of Dallas, told the College Fix that some students and parents seem they feel entitled to an A. Last year, a parent contacted the dean, the provost, and the president to complain that I had told the class the first day that it would be a challenge to get an A because an A represents excellence. I want to make a note here in that if you're feeling entitled to an A, you're feeling entitled to having an equal outcome to someone who put in a lot more work than you did. And someone who tried and someone who wants to learn. You don't deserve that A. You do have to earn it, or at least you should have to earn it anyway. But the equality of outcomes is the antithesis of excellence, is the point here. It is hard to get an A, and it should be. This is all contributing to making a college degree a worthless rubber stamp, and at the same time, the cost of college education is soaring to cover all of the luxury lifestyle of student need. Oh, wait a second. To cover all of the luxury lifestyle student life needs. The primary reason students ask for a grade change, according to the educator survey, included a low grade would ruin their average, and they believe the teacher's grade was biased, or that their parents will get mad if they know they didn't do their work. Well, that's your own fault if you're dealing with your parents. Grady, in her op-ed, said the trend will yield negative long-term consequences. Quote, the only valid reasons for students to request grade changes are if you make mathematical mistakes or didn't give enough points to justify points off, or when most of the class gets a question wrong, because you didn't teach the content well, Grady said. But otherwise, no other reason should be considered, and you should openly share that sentiment with students. This is exactly my sentiment. It does not help students improve to just coddle them and give in. That's because, grade grubbing might be the name here, but it's coddling, is what it is. It's trying to get everybody to an equal outcome, even if it's undeserved. In this particular instance, no. Mathematical mistakes, you screwed up teaching the content, that would be fair. Like I said, the only other deference I would give is in terms of whether or not to let a student try again on something. Is the notion, emergency situations happen, and that's the thing. And this final comment here, actually, I think makes it quite well. Inflating grades will only yield cognitive dissonance between how students, are actually performing versus how highly they think of themselves as mastering the material, O'Grady said. If they can't do it in your class, they won't be successful after graduation. This is exactly the point. I've got problems with grade grubbing, or just coddling, or in the case of what the educators are doing, coddling the students, because that does not help them succeed in the real world, but that is not going to happen. You are not going to get folks who are going to give you that deference. They're not going to give you, like I said, they're not going to give you the praise. They're not going to give you the A just because you want it. Where is the mastery of material and demonstration of ability? And this is not a good thing. And this is the actual survey itself here, which is made available from intelligent.com. I've also provided links in the description for you. Students begging or threatening their instructors for a higher grade than they've actually earned, commonly known as grade grubbing, is a problem frequently encountered and discussed by today's educators. To find out more about common grade grubbing is how common grade grubbing is in today's learning institutions and how educators typically respond, in August, Intelligent.com surveyed 288 high school teachers and college professors. 44% of educators say students often ask for better grades than they've earned. 82% have given into the demands. This is false framing, because it's a sliding scale in the question in terms of how often you give in. So that again, false framing. 38% faced harassment from students, 33% from parents over grades. 45% believe Gen Z students ask for better grades more frequently than previous generations. Um, how often, if ever, do students ask you to change it? So, very often, somewhat often, rarely, never. So, I mean, the very often and somewhat often is less than half. Most to say here, what is it? It's 44. Yeah. 8 and 10. Yeah, this is where I get annoyed. Approximately how often do you agree to improve a student's grade when asked? Um, it's more than half are in this particular section of rarely or never. Um, it's a little bit less than half that are actually in the thing of occasionally, sometimes, and always. Again, like I said, I don't think it's a good idea to do this. But let's see. How do you believe this generation does? Okay. 1 in 3 educators have been harassed by parents over grades. I would have to ask others because I'm not a parent myself. If this is an issue for you, in terms of that, you have a hard time being told perhaps your student is not necessarily doing as well in school as you think they are. Let's see. 80% of respondents say students have gone above their head to complain about receiving lower grades than they wanted. 33% say this rarely happens. 16% say it happens every so often. 18% somewhat often. And 13% very often. And 20% say this never happens to them. When asked if they have faced any other consequences as a result of giving lower grades than they wanted, 38% say they've been harassed by students, 33% by parents, 30% have been reprimanded by higher ups. That's not a good thing, actually. And 7% have been 7% have been fired. Damn. I mean that don't get me wrong. That percentage wise is a small number, but you're giving students you're fired for giving students a bad grade because they didn't do the work, perhaps. Weren't interested in learning. Write-in responses also included student appeals the grade and I must defend my actions in assigning the grade I submitted. Bad, poor evaluations from the students. Complains on the school's social media account for students. Yeah, 38%, 33%. Reprimanded by higher up. Jeez, I'm criminy. Who is doing that? What universities are is it a situation where you're getting reprimanded by your supervisor or something like that as a professor if you're doing this, or I mean principals, given this was both high school students and college professors. I'm surprised that didn't make it into the College Fix article, to be honest, because that actually seems to be more concerning. But I bring this up because I do very much whoop, that's not the right one. An article for another time. I do very much agree with the sentiment is that eventually it's going to come back to haunt the students. They're going to be told they did so well and look how brilliant they are and all this other kind of stuff, and then they come back and find nope, not really, when somebody will not give them a grade just because they want it. And the reason I was reminded of something in particular, remember the story of Maitland Jones, who was fired from NYU because his students complained about his grades. And he was teaching organic chemistry. But this kind of notion that you just earn a grade for showing up in class, I've earned an A for just showing up in class, that's not going to end well for students. That doesn't help students learn. That doesn't help students do any better at anything. It just teaches them that it doesn't teach them anything, really. It just teaches them how to be entitled, or think they're entitled for something when they're not. But Maitland Jones got in trouble with this because he very much tried to uphold standards at NYU, New York University, and was fired. This was his op-ed from October of last year in the Boston Globe. I was fired from NYU after students complained that the class was too hard. Who's next? In these times when critical thinking skills are desperately needed, it is more important than ever to dedicate ourselves to the high standards of education. Let's see. Yeah, he was actually trying very much to help accommodate students um during COVID, during the pandemic. Um, Organic chemistry is a difficult and important course, a rite of passage for future medical doctors, scientists, and many engineers. Professions that require the ability to reason well from a set of new data. No longer is Orgo a memorization course. Those of us who teach it aim to produce critical thinkers, future diagnosticians, and scientists. Neither of the traditional participants in this course, the students and the teachers, are doing well. Many of the students seem increasingly unwilling to put in the necessary effort to master the material, and teachers are burning out at a rapid rate. And this actually, now that I think about it, this might actually be a very good reason why some instructors are okay with just grade grubbing and what have you, because they're burned out and they don't want to fight the argument out either with the parents, the students, or their supervisors. Even before COVID-19 disrupted classrooms, there were signs of trouble. I came to New York University in 2007 after 43 years of teaching and research at Princeton, where I had both tenure and an endowed chair. I wanted to see if the technique I had introduced at Princeton, in which the talking head lecture was de-emphasized in favor of small group problem solving, was transferable to another university. All went well at first as students prospered in the problem solving setting and younger faculty began to adopt it. But about 10 years ago, I noticed that students were increasingly misreading exam questions. My careful attention to the wording of problems did not help much. Exam scores began to decline, as did attendance in the traditionally large lecture section of the course. Then COVID hit. Co-teaching with two excellent professors, I commissioned and paid for a series of 52 videos to substitute for canceled in-person lectures. Students rarely watched them. They performed abysmally on exams that would have seemed too easy only a few years ago. A few did attend the Zoomed office hours, but they were the best students in the class, not the ones who needed help. Exams that should have yielded a B average dropped to a C minus or worse. Single-digit scores became common, and we even had zeros on exams, something that had never happened before. Despite those declining scores, about 60% of my students still got A's and B's this past semester. At the same time, the bottom was dropping out under the poorly performing members of the class. The top students, while still deserving their excellent grades, were no longer being stretched. You're not challenging them. You got to challenge and poke things to get students to improve. You absolutely have to do that. Previously, they would be getting 90s. Now they were routinely getting 100. Their A grades would not change, of course, but they were not being challenged and thus not learning as much as they should. It wasn't their fault, it was ours. Student evaluations, once highly useful, have become just another social media opportunity to vent. Evaluations are now often personal and sometimes profane. The good ones swell your head, the bad ones upset you. It's a pity that their usefulness has disappeared. My co-teacher and I began to receive anonymous emails, often just short of threatening. In the fall of 2020, we were accused of being insufficiently sensitive to the stressful issues of the day. We were urged to make accommodations, such as online multiple-choice exams. This spring, some students sent a petition to the NYU deans, evidently complaining about the procedures and the grades in the course. The deans never revealed the contents of the petition to me, so I was unable to refute it in any way. After months of silence on their part, on August 2nd, 2022, the deans fired me over the objections of the chemistry department. The administration summarily dismissed the grievance I filed. The point is not that I was unjustly treated. My reputation as a chemist and educator has not been seriously damaged. NYU is still using the videos I had made and the approximately 200 problems I developed for the problem-solving version of the course. In any event, I had been teaching for many years, and the time for me to step aside was probably upon me. What is overwhelmingly important is that the chilling effect of such intervention by administrators on teaching overall, and especially on untenured professors. Can a young assistant professor, almost all of whom are not protected by tenure, teach demanding material? Dare they give real grades? Their entire careers are at peril of complaining students and deans who seem willing to turn students into nothing more than tuition-paying clients. Nor are tenured faculty unaffected. At NYU, some refuse to teach undergraduates any longer. The teaching in the chemistry department has been negatively affected, both by the decline in student capacity and the intervention of third-party administrators. In a university, the feeling of community crumbles when trust is lost. If tenured faculty cannot depend on fair minded support from their departmental and university leadership, they cannot transfer their knowledge and experience to the next generation of students and teachers. If non tenured young teachers dare not explore rigorous material with students, they will never maximize their teaching skills as they once hoped. Everyone has a part to play in rectifying this declining situation. Students need to develop the ability to take responsibility for failure. If they continue to deflect blame, they will never grow. Everyone hits limits at some point, and it is a vital life skill to use failure to overcome and improve. Failure should become a classic teachable moment. Teachers must have the courage to assign low grades when students do poorly without fear of punishment. Critically, the growing number of administrators, major and minor, who are often without any expertise in a given subject matter, need to learn to stand back from purely academic matters and support the faculty. Deans must learn not to coddle students for the sake of tuition and apply a little tough love. They must join the community in times of conflict to generate those teachable moments. In these times when critical thinking skills are desperately needed, it is more important than ever to dedicate ourselves to the high standards of education. Without those standards, we as a nation will not produce these individuals, doctors, engineers, scientists, citizens, who will guide us toward a better future. Now, Maitland Jones put this out in 2022, October 2022, in the Boston Globe. It's an op-ed there. Of course, it's linked in the description for you. But I think his point is well made in that grade grubbing, yeah, fine, students can ask for it. You shouldn't give it. Ever. Because that doesn't help students become better. It does not help students become better in their grades. It does not help students master material. It does not help students be prepared to be doctors, engineers, scientists, mathematicians, you name it. It doesn't help them with it. Don't coddle students. Don't give in to the grade grubbing schemes. That's all I can say on that one. Do not do it, because you are not helping students become better. You are not helping students master material. You're not pushing them. You're not pushing the great students that you have to their limits so they can learn even more. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. May you stay curious, everybody.